Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Michelle Battersby. For those of you who don't know who this incredible human is, she launched the Bumble app in Australia or across 5 countries in APAC. She was also the Chief Marketing Officer at Keep It Cleaner after she looked for another challenge leaving Bumble. She's now the co-founder of Sunroom. She's moved over to LA. She's engaged to the incredible Billy Meeks, who has been a guest of the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast before, and she's a very smart individual. I get along with Michelle very well, and I've been super excited for this conversation today. So firstly, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. I'm pumped to be here.
Fuck yeah. Good. So now tell me, since I saw you last in person, you've had a fair few life changes. I guess you could say there's been a lot that's happened for you, including, the engagement and the move across to the States. So before we kind of dig into a little bit more of the business side of things, do you want to fill us in with what the last kind of 12 months has looked like for you? Because I know it's been pretty full on, and there was a period there where shit was all over the place with Billy playing overseas and whatnot. So how have you settled into the States, and what's the last 12 months been like?
Yeah, wow. The last 12 months have been so huge. It's actually hard to remember everything that has happened. It was only it was probably 13 or 14 months ago that Sunroom was even an idea in my mind. I was still in Melbourne working at Keep It Cleaner. Bill had moved to London to play rugby. When he left, I had no intention of relocating to LA myself. He was always moving to London, and then he was going to move to LA straight after. So when we said goodbye, I thought we were saying goodbye for at least a year until COVID was over.
And because prior to that, he'd already been away for what? It was at least 3 months or something, wasn't he? Come back for a couple of weeks and then took off again.
Yeah, I think it was 3, or it could have even been 5 months. And then he was back for something like 6 weeks. And then he got this last minute opportunity to go and play rugby in London before moving to LA. And of course, took it.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that when I said goodbye to him, I wasn't 100% sure I was going to do Sunroom. I wasn't thinking really about moving to LA. And it's just crazy that these things fell into place and meant that we could end up living in the same country, because our relationship had been long distance for 4 years. When we were living in Melbourne together, that was meant to be our first year together. But COVID happened, so he left. And it just
when you move to Melbourne thinking you're going to make it a little easier, and he moves overseas.
Yeah, it's been so strange, but it is crazy how sometimes things just all work out. And I feel like the stars really aligned, and it feels like both of us are exactly where we're meant to be. And I guess you just got to trust the process and take opportunities as they present themselves to you, and just have an open mind, I suppose.
100%. Let's backtrack a little bit, even prior to Bumble. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have tuned in that when they heard me introduce you and even mentioned the whole thing about you launching Bumble, there's going to be people that want to hear a lot more about that. But before we kind of touch on that, what were you doing before Bumble? And I guess, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do down the track before that opportunity come about?
So before Bumble, I went to Sydney University. I was never really that smart at school. I was always into sport, and sport was the reason why I went to school. And in the HSC, I did not do that well. I actually got given extra UAI points, or ATAR as it's called now. I got extra marks for sport. And that was actually the only reason why I got into Sydney Uni, because of these extra extra marks for rowing. And rowing was my passion and what gave me routine and structure and drive. And I loved it. And so I just studied and rowed, and I did a Bachelor of Arts because I
Yep.
had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And then, eventually I think with so many people that do sport, there comes a time when you realize that you're probably not going to make it to the Olympics. So training 12 times a week isn't actually that fun.
Yeah.
So I gave up rowing, and I think I just transitioned my passion into the next thing that kind of fell at my feet. And that became doing a master's degree. So I did a master's in human resource management and industrial relations, and I got an internship at an investment bank. And I went into investment banking, and I worked at UBS, which is a Swiss investment bank, and Citibank, which is headquartered in New York. And I was an HR generalist. So I basically I used to actually investigate people for misconduct. And I used to make people redundant sometimes. I used to do performance management. I used to work with heads of business departments on promotions and pay rises, and kind of guide them on how to motivate, retain, and attract talent.
Right.
So a very different thing. I sometimes feel like I've had a few lives when it comes to what I've done for work. And so I worked in investment banking for about 4 years, but whilst it was challenging, I just didn't feel like I could do it for the rest of my life. And I found myself looking around the room, realizing that I wasn't as passionate as the other people around me.
Yep.
And I can remember thinking, why does everyone care so much? I don't care that much. And it wasn't about them or the profession, it was a me thing.
You just weren't passionate about it.
Yeah, I just wasn't passionate enough. And I can very vividly remember sitting at my desk one day thinking, there is something else out there that I am so much better at than this. And I just had this deep feeling deep down that something was there. I just repeated the word deep to way too many times in a close sentence.
Yeah, we get the point. It was deep. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really deep. And I just knew I had to start talking to people and start figuring out what it was going to be, because I didn't think I could do HR anymore. And so that's what I did. I just started speaking to friends, started looking into other very random things. One of those things was actually becoming a PT, and because I'd done all the rowing and all of that training, I had been interested in that kind of thing. And I looked into becoming a PT and maybe launching my own thing.
Yep.
It's weird because I'd forgotten about that, and then I ended up working at Keep It Cleaner. 3 or 4 years later, and I'd actually forgotten that was something I'd thought about. But yeah, it was those conversations with my network that led me to an introduction to Whitney Wolfe Herd, who's the CEO and founder of Bumble. And that's how that transition happened.
Do you think that early experience, like, as you said, even going back to, say, rowing, like the structure that's involved in training, taking care of your diet, recovery, like you said, the drive and the motivation to follow something that you've got your sights set on. Do you think, even though you didn't end up going to the Olympics for rowing, with all the ventures that you've been fortunate enough to try your hand at, like already up until this point, do you think like the structure from the early days has helped in the business side of things?
Definitely. Rowing is a very hard sport. I think it's meant to be the 3rd hardest sport in the world or something. Like you've been on an earth.
Extremely physical, yeah.
Those things aren't fun.
Yeah, I'm not on there long, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I used to wake up at 4:55 every single day, and I used to train 12 times a week. And I was also a lightweight rower for a very short period of time. So I was also on a pretty strict meal plan, trying to keep my weight at a certain level. I think experiencing something like that, it teaches you, it really does teach you how to deal with pain. And I think sometimes pain can be physical and mental, and sometimes pain can be pushing yourself through tasks that you're not loving, but you just need to get to the end
Shows you that
of.
on that other side of the adversity, that's where all the good stuff happens, or potentially anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have committed to something, and to have seen something through. And I think sport is an amazing tool in instilling some really solid like characteristics or maybe qualities in yourself. And working at a startup's also really hard, and it's about growth, and it's about pace, and it's about performance, and that's quite like sport at a certain level. So yeah, I think just knowing how to push yourself in any environment is a good thing to have experienced.
How about the HR side of things in regards to managing people, or even having, as you said, you had to make people redundant. So learning how to have the tough conversations that so many people would avoid, even, to the extent of nothing to do with the workplace. I know so many people constantly avoid the uncomfortable conversations that they probably know they have to have. So I'm assuming that would have held you in good stead for the stuff that you've kind of been involved in over the last few years.
Definitely. And I didn't realize at the time I was transitioning into Bumble that what I'd learned in HR would end up being so valuable. But it really has helped me to have experience in that area, and to have seen our big global corporations deal with complex personnel issues. Like, that's a very good thing to be across. How you treat people in the workplace is incredibly important. How you hire and fire really matters. How you retain people matters. How you show people that you appreciate them matters. And also creating a certain kind of culture is really important. So yeah, I was surprised how transferable, I am still surprised how transferable those skills are. Even today, I was talking to my co-founder about salary stuff, and I remembered something from my days at Citibank, and yeah, it's still relevant.
100%. So you step into into launching Bumble across 5 different countries. That I'm assuming, like, going from being HR to doing something to this scale would have been quite overwhelming. Did you have at any point in time suffer from, I guess, imposter syndrome? Like, obviously, you've shown firsthand that you had all the skills and the work ethic to do it because it was such a success. But were you kind of at any point in time sitting there thinking, like, what the fuck have I got myself into here?
It's such an interesting one, and I am only just figuring this out because I definitely have imposter syndrome at the moment. And in the past, I hadn't experienced it. I surprisingly didn't experience it at Bumble. And I've thought about, why that is. And I think it was because I was just so incredibly supported and appreciated. And at Bumble, it was honestly such a privilege working with so many brilliant women that really made me feel like they wanted me to succeed. I just felt like I had this army of supporters behind me, helping me along the way, especially the first few hires at Bumble in the US. And I think that might be what ensured me that I didn't feel imposter syndrome. I just worked for, like, Whitney was such an egoless leader, and I really believe she wanted everyone in that
you
place
fully
to
bought
succeed.
to what you were, your mission.
And I just felt like she was my number one supporter and always there cheering me on. And I feel like perhaps that's why I didn't really feel imposter syndrome when I was there, because of the support I had around me and the resources I had around me. And I definitely wasn't doing it alone. I was with so many amazing people that were right there with me every step of the way. And they charted the territories I was in before, so I could take what they had done and reapply it in a way that applied to an Australian demographic.
Yeah.
I also think perhaps the growth of Bumble contributed to me not feeling imposter syndrome, because it was just such this rocket ship of
Seeing firsthand how well it was going. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely experienced self-doubt, like 100%. I had none
Yeah.
of the qualifications I needed on paper. So I experienced self-doubt. I wondered how I was going to do things, but I don't think I really experienced imposter syndrome where like I
Yeah.
didn't feel worthy to be there, or I felt like a phony and things like that, or like a fraud, which are some of the things that I feel are more associated with imposter syndrome.
Do you think was there anything like that stood out to you that I guess shocked you once you did launch, in terms of like may have been how well it went, or a certain part of the job that you really enjoyed that you didn't expect to enjoy as much, or like what was that whole experience like? Was there anything that kind of just almost blindsided you with that experience?
Oh, like, I mean, it was, I guess something that I found surprising was that we were able to pick up exactly what we'd done in Australia and go to Hong Kong
Okay.
and roll it out, and it would just work straight away again. And then you pick that up again and you take it to the Philippines and it just worked.
Found
And
the right
sometimes,
formula.
yes, and it almost felt too easy
Mm-hmm.
at times. Like, wow, is this it? But I think I don't think marketing needs to be over engineered. I think it
Mm-hmm.
actually is quite simple. And there was a lot of proven success in America, as I said, and perhaps they ran into more hurdles than those of us in other markets that got to follow did. Perhaps
Yeah.
they'd copped the brunt of the challenges, and so we were almost shielded from that in a way. But I did find it quite surprising how simple and easy it seemed to be able to be replicated in other markets. I also think, though, walking into Bumble, I had no idea how much it was going to change my life,
Yeah.
uh, and what an experience it would be. If someone had told me at the start of accepting that job that I would even have to do things like interviews for newspapers or sit on panels or host events, I probably would have been too scared to say yes.
Yep.
But it really was about like rolling with the punches,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I had to let go of any shame or embarrassment or fear associated with even using myself as a marketing tool. And
Yep.
I just became comfortable with throwing myself in the deep end and doing, whatever I had to do to help get the word out there and to help Bumble grow. But I think the press side of things and the interest that people ended up having in Bumble definitely came as a surprise, and I never foresaw, any of that.
Was there anyone that you were I wouldn't say looking up to, but were people that you were consuming their content at the time are in the marketing or business space that you were, I guess, taking like inspiration from, or taking bits and pieces from to start to learn on the fly, or even just to get a bit of what would you call it, or just like knowledge around the things that you were going through from people that had been through it previously?
Definitely, like Whitney is an amazing role model, and it was so great having her so close and being able to watch her grow as well. The thing
Mm-hmm.
with Bumble is there were just all these women, and we were all growing at the same time and all being thrown into these situations that
Yeah.
we never could have predicted. And there were other country leads as well in one in particular in London, who I also reported into, and like she was doing the same kind of thing in her market. But I also think external one outside of Bumble, like Zoe Foster Blake, I think is amazing at managing her personal and private life, as well as her public face of go-to skinwear type role that she plays. So having incredible business women like her sharing so much online is she sets a great example, and she's someone that I often like keep an eye on to see how they're doing things and responding to things and sharing certain things.
When the time came to step away from Bumble and ultimately end up taking the role with Keep It Cleaner, was that a matter of felt like you'd kind of been there and done that and looking for a new challenge, or like what was the reasoning behind wanting to step away from Bumble?
Yeah, so I had thought about leaving Bumble a bit earlier. To be honest, I had felt like as I said, expanding Bumble into new markets, it started to feel like it was a tried and tested recipe that I could just keep rolling out.
Yeah.
And the same thing was happening internally in Australia. The way that we would do events and activations and marketing campaigns, I also felt like we'd somewhat cracked the code on that as well. And I wasn't really learning as much. I also wasn't as in tune with, I could never get my hands on the product. I wasn't working with engineers, working in an offshore regional office and not being at HQ, just naturally you miss out on some key leadership decisions. So I felt like I needed to keep growing my toolkit, and that's why I had started looking for other things. I got my promotion to, I guess, expand Bumble into other markets as a way to retain me for longer. And that was great. And that's why I went and launched other markets. But then the same thing happened where I felt like I was just doing the same sort of thing. And so that's why I started looking again. And, I'd worked with Steph and Laura when I was at Bumble. I really loved working in tech and with apps. And I knew I needed to work on a product that continued to better the lives of women. That's what I established was what kept me really, hungry and motivated. And that's what I truly am passionate about. And I love working on brands and products that have a purpose. So when Steph and Laura came to me, I felt like I probably couldn't find, I felt like they were the best option in Australia for sure. Women founded, great mission, making health and wellness accessible. So it just seemed like a really great next step. And I'd obviously be at HQ. I'd get to work much more closely with the product. And they were, beginning to think about expanding into international markets. So I thought, perfect, I can almost do what I did with Bumble, but maybe in reverse, because I was never going to get exposure working in the US or the UK. They already had teams exactly like mine. What would I be able to bring to those regions? So it seemed like the right move, and came at a good time. And honestly, I'm really happy with how I left Bumble. Is something that I'm really proud about. I loved my time there, and I wanted to leave on a high, and I wanted to leave with fond memories. And as a saying that I often say to myself when I'm out at a party at 1 or 2 a.m, and it's always best to leave the party while you're still having fun. And that is what I did with Bumble.
That's good. I might have to start using that one for myself. Obviously, stepping into the marketing role at Keep It Cleaner, as you said, there was some new things coming, which you had a big hand in getting going and stuff. But at the same time, it was a horrible time, I would imagine, for someone in your position to step into that role when pretty much the world's shutting down. Obviously, an app where the workouts are done at home and stuff is fantastic. But, this is just what I've thought, and you can let me know if I'm wrong. But I would imagine it would have been quite frustrating, you being restricted to what you do best, not being able to do it pretty much because everyone's stuck inside.
For sure. I definitely struggled with that. But the really good thing was I think it's only natural when you go into lockdown and you're in that kind of position to like think about what could be. It's such a bad mindset to be in, but I think it's natural that we all think about that from time to time. And of course I thought about, what would I be doing if I had stayed at Bumble? And I
Yep.
definitely wouldn't have been contributing as much as I was able to contribute at Kick. So I
Yeah.
actually feel like it was almost perfect, because
Yep.
I got to work on something that really helped people within their homes, and was something that people really needed, and ended up taking on a big project of, relaunching the app and
Yep.
rebuilding it, that you were obviously a part of. And that really kept me going and kept me really motivated. And I love the feeling, and it's probably sick to admit this, but I love feeling under extreme pressure and like pace is being forced at me when I'm at
Similar,
work.
yeah. I'm very similar, yeah.
Yeah, like when a crisis goes down, I'm like, fuck yeah, like this is what I need. Like something's happening on social media, like some company's made some decision, like what are we gonna do? Like I love that.
Thrive off that pressure.
Yeah, and I felt super grateful that when I was at Kick, relaunching relaunching the app and doing this rebuild gave me that fire and that pace to really keep me motivated. And yeah, I think Kick ended up being such a saving grace for so many people through lockdown. So that's obviously a great thing to have been able to work on during that time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now let's move on. I know there's kind of like limited things you can tell us about Sunroom, but it's obviously such an exciting journey and I would imagine quite a scary step to take for you as well, like coming from Bumble, then Keep It Cleaner to, established workplaces where, your role is kind of set in place and you know what to expect. Whereas now, even though you've just told us you absolutely love pressure and when she hits a fan, so I'm sure you're absolutely loving it. But how does this whole, I guess, concept of Sunroom come about from, the first time, it was an idea to where it is right now? And I guess, are you able to give the listeners a bit of an idea of exactly what it is?
Yeah, so I feel really fortunate, I suppose. My career's been a little bit strange. It's like things have come to me at a time, at just the right time. And I don't know how that is. I don't know if it's manifestation or trusting your gut,
Is
or
that
just being
something that you
open.
do? Are you a big manifester and like, do you meditate or are you into the whole kind of like mindfulness side of things?
Yeah, I think I do manifest, but I don't, sit down and think really hard. I more just like write things down. And it's interesting because I actually have a diary, and I think it was like August or September last year,
Yep.
I'd actually written in it that I wanted to found a tech company. And then, a few months later, this kind of came to me. But I had thought about doing my own thing before, even before Bumble came. As I mentioned, I was kind of thinking about things, but that definitely wouldn't have been the right time. And then when Bumble came to an end, I also was thinking about things then. And I feel like having Bumble and Kick under my belt, it definitely seemed like the right time. After Bumble, I felt like I still had more to learn. So that's what I really wanted to do. But going off track, so I was approached by an amazing woman. Her name's Lucy Mort, and she is an Aussie, and she worked at Hinge. She's been living in the States for about 7 years, but she is from a regional town in New South Wales, worked at Hinge, and she actually designed the whole interface at Hinge. So she was the lead designer.
Awesome.
Yeah, and she approached me. We have a mutual friend, and she sent me an email, saying that she was looking specifically for someone from Bumble to co-found something with. She knew I was, working at Kick, but did I have anyone maybe that I could recommend? And I thought, I don't know if I want to recommend someone, but
no, this girl Michelle.
yeah, I know someone who might be interested. And we basically just got on a call, and she spoke to me about the creator economy, I can't go too much into everything that she said, but it was a very interesting space that she was looking into. She was talking about things like OnlyFans,
Yep.
Patreon, Substack, these platforms that exist where creators can directly monetize their content.
Yep.
And it really sparked my curiosity. And so I also started looking into it and started speaking to my network, started speaking to creators that I'd worked with during my time at Bumble in particular. And just beginning to think about if I could do this or not. But one of the things that she did say when we were on this call is that she asked me, are you really tied to Australia? Because I think if we're going to do this, it has to be done in LA. And I thought, wow, that's a very great coincidence.
Yeah.
I actually am quite available to move to LA, and that would actually work quite well for me. So we basically just started working on this idea, and it really wasn't an idea at the start. She absolutely spearheaded it. But as we spoke to more people, we gradually began refining it. She had done a fellowship for tech entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And so she came into this with a lot of knowledge and an ability to make really well-informed and educated decisions. And she'd learned a lot at this fellowship about raising money and getting investors. And
was that
I've just learned
that you'd had to do it all at Bumble? Like, was that something that you were hands-on with?
No. So at Bumble, we never had to raise.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that I had experience with. I'd come into Bumble with great budgets and great security, a bit of a different startup experience. I think Bumble was somewhat unique in that regard. But Lucy had experience with that kind of thing at Hinge. So they were venture backed. So I honestly just learned so much from her about the process. I'd never pitched to investors before. I'd never raised money. And so once we kind of pressed the green light on doing all of it, which would have been around December last year, I remember I headed back to Sydney and I started speaking to investors and pitching it to people that I knew in Australia, and the learning curve during that was extreme. And those moments were incredibly exciting and incredibly validating when you're speaking to people and they want to give you their money. It's a pretty great feeling.
Yeah, bloody oath. A lot of responsibility too, though, I'd imagine. So like throughout this startup process and starting from absolute scratch, I can only imagine that there would be plenty of days, times where things don't exactly go how you're expecting, or there's things that take a fuckload longer than what you would hope or what you'd plan for. So I guess what's your process mentally around things like that? Like I know you said before you love it when shit hits the fan, but I'm sure there's times where you don't want shit to hit the fan and it does. So how have you found, just from experience, the best way to react to something like that is? And then on the second part of that, are you also going into this like with deadlines you're working towards, but also at the same time understanding that there's a high chance that it's not going to be anywhere near that?
So we went into this setting deadlines, and we learnt very quickly that is not a good idea, and just not something that's overly possible when it comes to tech.
Okay.
What we're building at the moment, it's not been built before. There's parts of it that are brand new. There's technology that's innovative. And so there's a lot of things that our engineering team are working on and discovering for the very first time, which is amazing, and it's exciting once it works. I think there's a point within the build where it makes sense to start setting deadlines. So if we were to have our time over again, we never would have tried to set a deadline within those first few months. And we learnt that the hard way, but I think these are just things that first time founders have to go through. But
Do you think, just sorry to cut you off, do you reckon there's like there's pros and cons to even having those deadlines? Like, I mean, on one hand, you're forcing yourself to put in the work, aiming towards a certain date and making sure you actually get shit done. But on the other hand, you'd almost find yourself in a state of, I guess, making shitty decisions or rushing things that shouldn't be rushed purely just to work towards a date. Like what?
yeah, actually, you've made me realize I'm so focused on our launch right now that when you're talking about deadlines, I'm literally just thinking like launch, launch, launch. The deadline is to launch.
Yeah.
But really, I suppose we really just break it down. So we do have deadlines and we do have goals. They're just for much smaller pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about like breaking it down and working out what is a top priority right now versus what can be saved for later, what's like a nice to have, or maybe what's a part of the app that we actually really don't need for launch and we can like put it on the back burner and maybe come back to it later. So it's about setting achievable goals and like sprinting towards them and then coming up with the next set of achievable goals and sprinting towards them. But there's this saying in tech that something like the last 10% of the bill takes 90% of the time.
Right.
And we've really we've hit that at the moment.
Okay.
And you just feel so close.
Yeah.
But it just seems to take forever. And it's like these three things that you need to fix, but they're three really complex things.
Okay.
And so to keep like motivation and excitement during that time, we really just have to, we celebrate all the small wins. You know, we talk about fundraising efforts. We talk about conversations we're having with influential people that are really interested. You know, we get a trusted group of people on the beta app, which is like the test environment, and we get them to provide feedback and sharing those little things and getting feedback in that way and receiving a bit of validation that way is what really keeps you like driving towards the goal.
For those that are listening, what is the most amount of information you can give us on what the Sunroom app, I guess, is going to be for, or even if you could just kind of give us an idea, or the listeners an idea of who like the target audience is for the app?
Yeah, so it is an app for women and non-binary creators to monetize their content. So
Awesome.
anyone will be able to download it, but specifically for women and non-binary creators, just to combat some of the hardships and challenges we're seeing that group face online at the moment.
Incredible. Awesome. When we obviously at the moment, you would be spending a shitload of time working. Anyone that has their own business, and I'm assuming it's 10 times more once you got a startup, but anyone that has their own business would understand that it's just nonstop. So is there certain things that you like to do to, I guess, find what they call like your flow state? Like when you sit down to get work done and just to really try and get in the most productive mood or state possible, is there certain things that you find help you?
Yeah, routine is it's a big one for me because unfortunately it's something that I tend to let slip when I really am under the pump. But having my own business now, I just feel like the pressure's really gone up, and it's not about just delivering for myself, it's about delivering for others and looking after everyone in our team, and there's just so much riding on this. So I've felt like I need to take myself up a gear. So I have been much more focused on how I actually look after myself. In the past, I've not been overly like healthy, working at places I really haven't, you know, committed to much exercise or eating healthy. I love a late night Uber Eats, and I've always been a fan of McDonald's. But for me, it's about starting the day right. So I'm obsessed with hot yoga. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy going to, and I don't feel like I'm dragging myself to something I hate. And not only is it great for my body, but it's really about my mind and having this hour in the morning to really like calm myself. And I tend to set 3, this is a new thing actually, and it was inspired by Bill, but meditating has always seemed quite daunting to me. And I was asking him, you know, how do you actually sit there for 20 minutes every morning and do your gratitude, you know, set your intentions and things like that. And he told me that he literally just thinks about the 3 things he wants to achieve in a day. He doesn't actually take his mind completely blank all the time. And I thought, okay, I can absolutely do that. So in hot yoga in the morning when we're doing shavasana for the last, you know, 2 to 5 minutes, that's what I'm doing. And I'm thinking about 3 things that I absolutely must do once I get home. And then, as I was saying before, it's become quite a weird thing for me, but I stopped drinking coffee. And for me, this decision to not drink a coffee in the morning is like me taking complete control of my day and doing something that I know makes my mind clearer and just sets me up in a better mental state for whatever is ahead. Because the thing with my days is absolutely nothing goes to plan. So if I can just do like a couple of things in the morning that make me feel like I have control of my mind, then I'm totally fine for like whatever is thrown at me for the rest of the day.
I'm super similar with my morning routine as well. It's like I could do my morning routine and do fuck all for the rest of the day and feel productive, or at least feel like I'm ready to be productive if I need to be. Whereas, like if I wake up and just kind of roll out of bed and out the front door, you already kind of feel like you're on the back foot for the whole day.
100%. And it sucks because, well, I had always enjoyed coffee, but now for me, a sign of me having a coffee in a day is like a symbol that I don't have my shit together.
Okay. Yeah, right. It's almost like you're on autopilot.
Yeah. It's like today's not going to be a good day for me.
Well, Michelle, look, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think all the listeners would absolutely have loved it as well. Super inspiring what you're doing, and wish you all the best. And I'm really excited to see how it all plays out over the next few months and years to come. So, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me. I've been trying to get you on for that bloody long, but I'm super happy we had a chat today. So thank you.
Same. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
Absolute pleasure. For everyone who's tuned in, we'd love for you to take a screenshot of this episode, post it up on Instagram story for us, tag myself, tag Michelle. Make sure you follow Sunroom and keep up with all the updates on there. And like I said, looking forward to seeing how it all plays out.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle.